They told her she wasn't worth their time, that someone like her didn't belong in their prestigious salon. But when her husband walked through those doors, everything changed in ways no one could have predicted. Sometimes, the people who judge you by your appearance are the ones who need the biggest reality check. Sarah Martinez had always believed that true beauty came from within, but growing up in the rough neighborhoods of East Cleveland, that philosophy was often tested. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her mother, Rosa, worked double shifts at a textile factory while her father, Miguel, repaired cars in their cramped garage to keep food on the table. Money was tight, but love was abundant in their small two-bedroom house. While other girls her age dreamed of designer clothes and expensive makeup, Sarah found herself drawn to books about business and entrepreneurship. She would spend hours at the public library, reading about successful women who had built empires from nothing. Her worn sneakers and secondhand clothes never bothered her because she had bigger dreams than fitting in with the popular crowd. After high school, Sarah took a job at a local community center, teaching computer skills to adults who had never had the opportunity to learn. The pay was minimal, but the work fulfilled her in ways that money never could. She watched single mothers learn to type their first emails, elderly immigrants discover the internet, and teenagers from troubled homes find new paths through technology. It was during one of these classes that she first met James Chen. He had wandered in on a Thursday evening, looking completely lost among the outdated computers and flickering fluorescent lights. His expensive suit seemed out of place in the modest community center, but there was something humble about the way he approached her desk. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I know this might sound strange, but I need to learn how to use email. My assistant usually handles everything, but I want to communicate directly with my employees." Sarah looked up from her lesson plans, surprised by his honesty. Most successful businessmen wouldn't admit to needing basic computer help, especially not in a place like this. She spent the next 2 hours teaching James the basics of email, internet browsing, and digital communication. What struck her most wasn't his willingness to learn, but his genuine interest in the other students. He asked thoughtful questions about the community center's programs and seemed genuinely moved by the stories she shared about her students' progress. "You're changing lives here," he told her as the class ended. "That's more valuable than most people realize." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment, but she brushed it off as polite conversation from a kind stranger. James returned the following week, and the week after that. Soon, their tutoring sessions extended beyond computers to long conversations about community development, social responsibility, and the importance of giving back. Sarah learned that James had built his tech company from a small startup in his garage, never forgetting his own humble beginnings as the son of immigrants who had sacrificed everything for his education. What began as computer lessons slowly blossomed into something deeper. James would arrive early to help set up chairs, stay late to help clean up, and even began funding new programs at the community center. He never made Sarah feel like she should be anything other than herself, celebrating her passion for helping others and her simple, genuine approach to life. 6 months after they met, James proposed during one of their evening walks through the community center's garden. There were no photographers, no elaborate displays, just James on one knee with his grandmother's ring, telling Sarah that she had shown him what true purpose looked like. The wedding was small and intimate, held at the community center where they had met, surrounded by Sarah's students, her family, and a few close friends. James insisted on keeping it simple, knowing that Sarah valued authenticity over extravagance. They honeymooned at a small cabin by the lake, spending their days hiking and their evenings planning how they could expand the community center's programs. For the first year of their marriage, life was blissful. James continued to grow his business while Sarah expanded her work at the community center, now funded by James's foundation. They lived modestly despite James's success, choosing to invest their money in programs that helped others rather than luxury items for themselves. But as James's company went public, and his net worth soared into the billions, their social circle began to change. Invitations to charity galas, business dinners, and exclusive events started arriving daily. Sarah felt increasingly uncomfortable at these gatherings, where conversations revolved around stock prices, vacation homes, and designer purchases, rather than meaningful causes. The women at these events were polished and pristine, with perfect hair, flawless makeup, and clothes that cost more than most people earned in a month. They spoke in carefully modulated tones about their latest spa treatments, their personal shoppers, and their upcoming trips to Milan for Fashion Week. Sarah's simple dresses and minimal makeup made her feel invisible among these glamorous socialites. "You should really consider updating your look," suggested Patricia Blackwell, the wife of a prominent investor, during one particularly uncomfortable charity luncheon. "There are some excellent stylists in the city who could help you develop a more sophisticated image." The comment was delivered with a smile, but the underlying message was clear. Sarah didn't fit in. Similar suggestions began coming from other directions. Margaret Sterling, whose husband owned a chain of luxury hotels, recommended a personal trainer who specialized in helping, quote, everyday women achieve red carpet-ready bodies. Linda Rothschild, a prominent socialite, suggested that Sarah might benefit from elocution lessons to, quote, refine her speaking style for high society events. Each comment chipped away at Sarah's confidence. She began to doubt herself, wondering if her simple approach to life was holding James back in his business relationships. When she shared these concerns with James, he assured her that she was perfect exactly as she was, but she could see the stress these social expectations were putting on their relationship. The breaking point came on a humid Tuesday afternoon in July. Sarah had been invited to join Patricia Blackwell's weekly ladies' lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown. She had hoped that spending more time with these women might help her find her place in James's new social circle, but the conversation quickly turned to an upcoming charity gala that James's company was sponsoring. "The gala is going to be absolutely divine," Patricia announced, sipping her imported sparkling water. "All the most important people in the city will be there. It's crucial that we all look our absolute best." She glanced meaningfully at Sarah. "Speaking of which, Sarah, have you given any thought to what you'll be wearing?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I was planning to wear the black dress I bought for our anniversary dinner." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret Sterling nearly choked on her salad, while Linda Rothschild's eyes widened in apparent horror. "Oh, my dear," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "That simply won't do. This isn't a community center fundraiser. This is the social event of the season. James's reputation is at stake." Sarah felt her face flush with embarrassment as the other women murmured their agreement. "What Patricia means," Margaret interjected, "is that as the wife of one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs, you have certain responsibilities. People will be watching, judging, forming opinions about James's company based on how you present yourself." Linda leaned forward conspiratorially. "There's a wonderful salon called Luxe Aesthetics on Fifth Avenue. Vivian Ashworth is the owner, and she's simply miraculous. She's transformed some of the most hopeless cases in the city. I could arrange an appointment for you before the gala." The word hopeless hit Sarah like a physical blow. Was that really how these women saw her? As a hopeless case that needed to be fixed? She managed to mumble her thanks and excused herself from lunch early, her appetite completely gone. That evening, she couldn't bring herself to tell James about the conversation. Instead, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, studying her reflection with new, critical eyes. Her shoulder-length brown hair was healthy but unstyled. Her skin was clear but makeup-free. Her clothes were clean and well-fitted but certainly not designer. For the first time in her life, Sarah saw herself through the eyes of high society, and she didn't like what she saw. The next morning, Linda Rothschild called with news that she had secured an appointment for Sarah at Luxe Aesthetics for the following Friday. "Vivian is doing this as a personal favor," Linda explained. "She's normally booked months in advance, but when I mentioned you were James Chen's wife, she agreed to squeeze you in." "You're so lucky." Sarah spent the rest of the week in a state of nervous anticipation. She researched Luxe Aesthetics online, finding a sleek website filled with photos of impossibly glamorous women and testimonials from satisfied socialites. The salon's tagline read, "Where ordinary becomes extraordinary." The prices weren't listed, but the phrase "consultation required" appeared next to every service. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Sarah's mood perfectly. She dressed carefully in her nicest outfit, a navy blue blazer and matching skirt that she had bought for job interviews years ago. Her hands shook slightly as she applied a thin layer of mascara and lip gloss, her usual makeup routine feeling inadequate for what lay ahead. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The taxi ride to Fifth Avenue felt endless. Sarah watched the city change around her as they moved from her comfortable middle-class neighborhood to the gleaming towers and luxury boutiques of Manhattan's most exclusive district. By the time they arrived at Luxe Aesthetics, her palms were sweating despite the air conditioning. The Salon occupied the ground floor of a stunning Art Deco building, its floor-to-ceiling windows displaying arrangements of white orchids and crystal vases. The gold lettering on the glass doors looked hand-painted, and even the sidewalk in front of the salon seemed cleaner than the rest of the street. Sarah pushed through the heavy glass doors and found herself in what looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a hair salon. Marble floors reflected the light from an enormous crystal chandelier, while soft classical music played from hidden speakers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers, and every surface gleamed with polish. Behind a sleek black reception desk sat a young woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in perfect waves. Her makeup was airbrushed to perfection, and her white uniform looked more like designer couture than work clothes. "Good morning," the receptionist said, her voice melodious but cool. "How may I help you?" Sarah approached the desk, suddenly conscious of every step she took on the pristine marble floor. "I have an appointment at 10 o'clock, Sarah said, her voice smaller than she intended. "Sarah Martinez." "Well, Sarah Chen now." Linda Rothschild arranged it. The receptionist's fingers flew across her computer keyboard, her long acrylic nails clicking against the keys. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Chen," she said, though her tone suggested she was reading from a script rather than expressing genuine recognition. "You're here for a full consultation with Vivian. Please have a seat, and someone will be with you shortly." Sarah settled into one of the plush white leather chairs in the waiting area, trying not to fidget with her purse strap. The other clients in the salon moved with a confident elegance that Sarah envied. They air-kissed the staff, discussed their upcoming vacations to exotic locations, and seemed completely at ease in this rarefied environment. 20 minutes passed before anyone acknowledged Sarah again. She watched stylists glide between stations, their movements choreographed and precise. Every client seemed to be having the time of their life, laughing and chatting as their hair was washed, cut, and styled into works of art. Finally, a tall woman in her 50s approached Sarah's chair. She wore all black, her silver hair pulled back in a severe chignon and her makeup applied with the precision of a portrait painter. Everything about her screamed expensive, from her diamond earrings to her Italian leather shoes. "Mrs. Chen," she said, though her tone made it sound more like a question than a greeting. "I'm Vivian Ashworth. Linda Rothschild called about you." There was something in her voice that made Sarah's stomach tighten with anxiety. "Yes, thank you so much for fitting me in," Sarah said, standing to shake Vivian's hand. The salon owner's grip was firm but brief, and her eyes traveled up and down Sarah's figure with the efficiency of a scanner. Vivian murmured, more to herself than to Sarah. "Linda mentioned you needed help for an important event. When is this happening?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks at the word help, as if she were a charity case rather than a paying customer. "Next Saturday," Sarah replied. "It's a charity gala that my husband's company is sponsoring." Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Sarah's husband, but her expression remained professional. "I see. And what sort of budget are we working with?" Vivian asked, pulling out a sleek tablet to take notes. Sarah hesitated, realizing she had no idea what services like this typically cost. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "What would you recommend?" Vivian's lips pressed together in what might have been disapproval, and she exchanged a quick glance with the receptionist. "Well," Vivian said slowly, "a complete transformation for someone in your situation would typically run between $8,000 and $12,000. That would include cut, color, styling, makeup application, and wardrobe consultation." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. $12,000 was more than many of her community center students earned in several months. That seems like quite a lot," Sarah stammered. Vivian's expression shifted from professional to something colder, more calculating. Mrs. Chen, Vivian said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone, quality services require significant investment. Perhaps you should discuss this with your husband before making any decisions. The suggestion that Sarah couldn't make financial decisions for herself stung, but she tried to push past the insult. Could we start with something smaller? Sarah asked hopefully. Maybe just a haircut and styling for now? Vivian looked at her as if she had suggested performing brain surgery with a butter knife. I'm afraid that wouldn't be sufficient for your needs, Vivian replied curtly. Based on what I can see, you would require extensive work to achieve the level of sophistication expected at a high-profile charity gala. Each word felt like a small slap, and Sarah could feel her confidence crumbling. What do you mean by extensive work? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Vivian gestured vaguely at Sarah's appearance, her expression suggesting she was looking at a particularly challenging renovation project. Your hair needs significant reshaping and professional coloring to add dimension. Your eyebrows require complete restructuring. Your skin would benefit from a series of treatments to achieve the proper glow. And frankly, your overall presentation needs considerable refinement. Vivian delivered this assessment with the clinical detachment of a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. Sarah felt tears threatening to spill over, but she blinked them back. I understand that I'm not as polished as your usual clients, she said quietly, but I was hoping you could help me feel more confident for this event. It's important to my husband's business. Vivian's expression softened slightly, but not with sympathy. Instead, she looked at Sarah with something that might have been pity. Mrs. Chen, I appreciate your honesty, but I have to be honest with you as well. Lux Aesthetics has built its reputation on creating perfection, not performing miracles. Our clients come to us already possessing a certain level of sophistication and style. We enhance what's already there. And you don't think I have that foundation? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vivian's silence was answer enough, but she continued anyway. I think you're a lovely person, I'm sure, but the type of clientele we serve at charity galas and high society events, they have certain expectations. They can spot authenticity from across a room, and frankly, no amount of styling can create something that isn't naturally there. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one confirming her worst fears about herself. So you won't help me? Sarah asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Vivian glanced around the salon, where other clients were being pampered and transformed, then back at Sarah with an expression of regret that didn't quite reach her eyes. I think it would be better for everyone involved if you found a salon that specializes in more accessible styling. There are several excellent establishments in the outer boroughs that might be better suited to your needs and budget. The dismissal was gentle but absolute, and Sarah felt the last of her dignity slipping away. She managed to thank Vivian for her time, though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. As she walked toward the exit, she could hear whispered conversations behind her, staff members discussing her visit in hushed tones that carried just enough for her to catch phrases like, completely out of her depth, and some people just don't understand. The ride home passed in a blur of tears and humiliation. Sarah stared out the taxi window at the bustling city streets, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. By the time she reached her apartment, she had made a decision that would change everything, though she didn't know it yet. She would find a way to prove Vivian Ashworth wrong, not just about her appearance, but about her worth as a person. But first, she needed to figure out how to tell James what had happened, and why she was more determined than ever to attend that charity gala, no matter what it took. Sarah sat in her living room that evening, still wearing the same navy blazer she had worn to Lux Aesthetics, unable to bring herself to change clothes. The humiliation felt like a weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. When James walked through the door at 7:30, she was still sitting in the same position, staring at her hands. "Hey, beautiful," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "How was your day?" Sarah looked up at him, this brilliant man who had built a tech empire from nothing, who treated janitors and CEOs with equal respect, who had chosen her out of everyone in the world. How could she explain that she had been deemed unworthy of a haircut? "It was fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "How was yours?" James studied her face with the careful attention he usually reserved for complex business problems. "Sarah, what happened?" he asked, sitting beside her on the couch. "You look like someone died." The gentleness in his voice broke down the last of her defenses, and she told him everything. Every cutting comment, every dismissive glance, Every moment of humiliation at Vivian Ashworth's salon. James listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. "I'm going to call Linda Rothschild right now and tell her exactly what I think of her recommendations," he said, reaching for his phone. "No," Sarah said quickly, placing her hand over his. "That will just make things worse. It will confirm everything they think about me, that I can't handle myself in their world." James set down his phone and pulled her into his arms. "Their world is built on appearances and cruelty," he said fiercely. "You're worth 100 of them." Sarah wanted to believe him, but Vivian's words echoed in her mind. Some people just don't understand. Maybe she really didn't belong in James's new life. "What if they're right?" she whispered. "What if I really am holding you back?" James pulled back to look at her, his expression intense. "Sarah Chen, you are the smartest, kindest, most genuine person I know. If anyone can't see that, they're blind." He was quiet for a moment. Then a determined look crossed his face. "You know what? We're going to that gala, and you're going to be absolutely radiant. Not because you changed yourself, but because you're going to remember who you really are." Over the next few days, James made mysterious phone calls and disappeared for hours at a time. When Sarah asked what he was planning, he just smiled and said, "Trust me." He also made some calls to people he knew in the fashion and beauty industry, but not to transform Sarah. Instead, he was gathering information. The night of the charity gala arrived faster than Sarah had expected. She had found a simple but elegant black dress at a department store, had her hair styled at a modest salon in her neighborhood, and applied her makeup carefully using tutorials she had watched online. She looked in the mirror and saw herself, polished but authentic. "You look absolutely beautiful," James said as they prepared to leave. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo, but what struck Sarah most was the proud expression on his face as he looked at her. Ready to show everyone what real class looks like? The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum, its grand halls transformed into an elegant wonderland of flowers, lights, and carefully dressed socialites. Sarah recognized many faces from various charity events they had attended, including Patricia Blackwell, Margaret Sterling, and Linda Rothschild, all of whom were wearing gowns that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Sarah, darling!" Linda approached them with air kisses and a bright smile. "You look lovely. I heard about your visit to Luxe Aesthetics. Such a shame Vivian couldn't fit you in for the full treatment, but you've done wonderfully with what you have." The backhanded compliment stung, but Sarah managed to smile graciously. "Thank you, Linda. It's a beautiful event." As they moved through the cocktail hour, Sarah noticed the subtle looks and whispered comments. She could practically hear the conversations. "That's James Chen's wife. Can you believe he married someone so ordinary?" The evening proceeded smoothly until the auction portion of the event began. James had donated a significant sum to sponsor the gala, and when his name was announced as one of the evening's major benefactors, he stood to acknowledge the applause. But instead of simply waving, he walked to the microphone. "Thank you for that warm welcome," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the museum's main hall. "Before we continue with the auction, I wanted to share something important with all of you." Sarah's heart stopped. This wasn't part of the program. "Many of you know my wife, Sarah," James continued, gesturing toward her, "but I don't think you know who she really is." The room fell silent, and Sarah felt hundreds of eyes turning toward her. While we've all been focused on appearances and social status, Sarah has been quietly changing the world. James's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Did you know that Sarah has personally taught over 200 adults to read through her literacy program? That she's helped dozens of single mothers learn job skills that lifted their families out of poverty? That when the Martinez family lost everything in a house fire last month, Sarah organized the entire community response within 24 hours? The room was completely quiet now, and Sarah could see surprised expressions on faces throughout the crowd. "You see," James said, looking directly at Patricia Blackwell and her circle, "we've been so concerned with how people look on the outside that we've forgotten to see who they really are on the inside. My wife doesn't need expensive clothes or professional styling to be beautiful," James continued. "She's beautiful because of how she treats people, every person, regardless of their status or what they can do for her. She's beautiful because she uses her time and energy to lift others up instead of tearing them down. Sarah could see Linda Rothschild's face had turned pale, and Patricia Blackwell was staring at her hands. But James wasn't finished. So yes, I am incredibly proud to be married to this genuine, compassionate, brilliant woman. And if anyone has a problem with that, I invite you to spend 5 minutes learning about the work she does, and then tell me she doesn't belong in any room in this city. The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. People began approaching Sarah throughout the evening, wanting to hear more about her literacy program, offering to volunteer at the community center, sharing their own stories of humble beginnings that they had long kept hidden. But the most meaningful moment came when a young woman approached Sarah near the end of the evening. She introduced herself as Maria Santos, a server who had been working the event. "Mrs. Chen," she said quietly, "I was in your computer class 3 years ago. You helped me learn to type, and now I'm studying to be a nurse. I just wanted to say thank you." Sarah hugged Maria tightly, tears in her eyes. This was what mattered, not the approval of socialites, but the real impact she had on real lives. As the evening wound down, Patricia Blackwell approached Sarah with tears in her own eyes. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I was wrong about everything. I let my own insecurities make me cruel to you." Margaret Sterling and Linda Rothschild joined them, all looking genuinely ashamed. "We've been so focused on surface things that we forgot what really matters," Margaret admitted. "Would you consider letting us volunteer with your literacy program? We'd like to actually do something meaningful for once." But the real surprise came the next Monday morning. Sarah was at the community center, preparing for her weekly computer class, when an unexpected visitor arrived. Vivian Ashworth stood in the doorway looking completely out of place in her designer suit among the mismatched chairs and outdated equipment. "Mrs. Chen," Vivian said, her voice much smaller than it had been at the salon. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. I came to apologize." Sarah looked up from her lesson plans, surprised to see the woman who had humiliated her just days before. "I heard about your speech at the gala," Vivian continued. "Actually, I heard about who you really are. I made a terrible mistake judging you based on appearances." She paused, looking around the community center with new eyes. "I've built my entire business on making people look perfect on the outside, but I've forgotten what real beauty looks like." Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out a check. "I'd like to make a donation to your literacy program, and if you'll have me, I'd like to volunteer. I realize I have a lot to learn about what really matters." The check was for $50,000, more than the community center's entire annual budget. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Sarah said, accepting the check with a smile. "But I have one condition. When you volunteer here, leave the designer clothes at home. These people need to see that you're genuine, not that you're wealthy." Over the following months, Sarah's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. The literacy program expanded dramatically with new volunteers and funding. Vivian became one of her most dedicated helpers, trading her judgmental attitude for genuine compassion. Patricia, Margaret, and Linda all became real friends, their artificial politeness replaced by authentic warmth. Most importantly, Cher learned that she had never needed to change herself to fit into James's world. The right people would see her value, and the wrong people's opinions simply didn't matter. She continued working at the community center, continued wearing simple clothes that made her happy, continued finding joy in helping others. James's business grew even more successful, but not because Sarah had transformed her appearance. It thrived because clients and partners respected a man who valued substance over surface, who had married for love rather than status, who understood that true success meant lifting others up. 6 months later, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. Vivian was on the line, her voice excited. "Sarah, I have a proposition for you. What would you think about opening a community salon? A place where people can feel beautiful regardless of their budget or background." The idea was revolutionary. A salon that focused on making people feel confident and valued, not on excluding those who didn't meet arbitrary standards of sophistication. They opened beautiful beginnings in a renovated storefront next to the community center, offering sliding scale pricing and free services for job interviews and special occasions. The grand opening drew an unexpected crowd. Not just people from the community, but socialites who had learned to value authenticity over appearance, business leaders who wanted to support meaningful causes, and families who had never felt welcome in traditional salons. Vivian had completely transformed her approach to beauty, focusing on enhancing each person's natural qualities rather than imposing unrealistic standards. Beauty isn't about looking like everyone else, she would tell clients. It's about feeling confident in your own skin. Sarah stood in the bustling salon, watching elderly women get their hair styled for their grandchildren's graduations, young mothers preparing for job interviews, teenagers getting ready for prom regardless of their family's financial situations. This was what real beauty looked like. People feeling valued, respected, and confident. James found her there that evening, after the last client had left and the volunteers had finished cleaning up. "Any regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Sarah leaned back against his chest, looking around at what they had built together. "Only one," she said. "I regret that it took me so long to realize that the people who matter will love you for exactly who you are, and the people who don't aren't worth changing for." That evening, as they walked home hand in hand through their neighborhood, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that humiliating day at Lux Aesthetics. She hadn't become a different person. Instead, she had remembered who she had always been, someone who believed that true beauty came from kindness, authenticity, and how you treated others. The next morning brought news that Beautiful Beginnings had been featured in the city's largest newspaper, with a headline that read, "Local Salon Redefines Beauty Standards." The article included interviews with clients whose lives had been changed not just by free haircuts, but by being treated with dignity and respect. Sarah smiled as she read the article, then set it aside to prepare for another day of computer classes at the community center. Some things never needed to change, and helping others would always be the most beautiful part of her life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.